What did Donald Trump do today? March 27, 2025 recap. Donald Trump issued a proclamation imposing a 25% tariff on imported automobiles and automobile parts, reviving the administration's long-standing use of Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, once again invoking national security as the justification for sweeping trade restrictions. However, the definition of national security employed here is notably broad and vague. While the proclamation cites real challenges such as supply chain disruptions, foreign subsidies, and labor shortages, it stretches the statutory intent of Section 232, originally meant for defense-critical industries, into a catch-all for economic competition. This conflation of economic strategy with national defense weakens the legal and rhetorical weight of the argument and invites scrutiny from international trade partners and institutions like the World Trade Organization. The document acknowledges several failures outright. It concedes that negotiations led by the U.S. Trade Representative with the European Union, Japan, and others did not result in agreements to alleviate the supposed threat. Moreover, existing trade agreements like the USMCA, the revised U.S.-Korea deal, and recent domestic legislation are admitted to have had insufficient impact. Yet, instead of reconsidering the strategy or proposing new domestic investments in innovation or infrastructure, Trump's administration defaults to tariffs. This punitive and reactionary move underscores a lack of effective policy development over the past 6 years. The tariff policy itself is complex, punitive, and potentially costly for both businesses and consumers. Importers of USMCA-qualified automobiles are subjected to a burdensome verification process to determine U.S. content, and any errors can lead to retroactive penalties on all vehicles of the same model. This level of enforcement is unusually harsh, increasing the risk of litigation and chilling investment from both domestic and foreign firms. Additionally, the policy requires a heavy administrative burden from the Commerce Department and Customs and Border Protection, creating a bureaucracy around compliance that contradicts the administration's traditional stance against government overreach. More critically, the proclamation is strikingly silent on meaningful domestic economic solutions. While it blames foreign competition for the decline of U.S. auto manufacturing, it offers no new proposals for bolstering domestic production through innovation, workforce development, or support for electric vehicles. It is a reactive policy, not a visionary one. Trump's approach rests on shielding American industry through tariffs rather than empowering it to compete through modernization and investment. In doing so, it risks damaging relationships with key allies, igniting retaliatory trade measures, and further undermining the credibility of U.S. trade policy on the global stage. This proclamation doubles down on economic protectionism without offering a forward-looking plan. It relies on coercive trade measures under a questionable interpretation of national security, fails to learn from previous diplomatic and legislative shortcomings, and burdens American industry with more red tape in the name of defending it. The net effect may be more harm than help, not only to the auto industry but also to the United States' reputation as a reliable economic partner. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Guyanese President Ali held a press conference after they met during his visit to the South American nation and presented a public display of partnership that underscored mutual concerns about regional security, trade, and development. While both leaders emphasized shared values and strategic cooperation, their contrasting rhetorical styles revealed deeper distinctions in diplomatic posture. Rubio's remarks often leaned into performative bravado over substantive clarity. His repeated warnings that any Venezuelan aggression would result in a very bad day or week for Caracas sounded more like soundbites crafted for cable news than measured diplomatic deterrence. Despite his overt threats toward Venezuela, the absence of a concrete military commitment to Guyana's defense left a critical gap between rhetoric and policy. Rubio's vision for Guyana as a nation on the brink of transformation was aspirational yet overly simplified. He listed buzzword-heavy opportunities in artificial intelligence, agriculture, and ecotourism without grappling with the nuanced economic, institutional, and social frameworks required to make those sectors flourish sustainably. While intended to be inspiring, this rhetoric risked sounding naive, especially to regional observers familiar with the pace and complexity of development. On security and migration, Rubio took an aggressive and polarizing stance. His defense of revoking over 300 student visas from foreign nationals allegedly involved in campus protests veered into ideological overreach. By likening visa holders to unwelcome house guests who vandalize property, he reduced a complex issue, balancing free expression with immigration policy, to an inflammatory anecdote. His reference to student activists as lunatics and rioters contributed to an unnecessarily combative tone, more characteristic of a campaign rally than an international press conference. Similarly, his comments on gang deportations, while grounded in valid security concerns, were framed in alarmist language that could encourage anti-immigrant sentiment rather than thoughtful border policy. In contrast, President Ali offered a composed and diplomatically strategic presence. His remarks were thoughtful, forward-looking, and tailored to reinforce Guyana's sovereignty while emphasizing cooperation with the United States. He thanked Rubio for standing with Guyana against Venezuela's territorial aggression but used the opportunity to advocate for preferential trade treatment, arguing that true allies deserve material support. Ali's framing of shared democratic values and mutual respect suggested a firm grasp of statecraft, especially in a region where larger powers often seek influence without reciprocity. He also showed a nuanced understanding of regional needs, touching on healthcare, energy, infrastructure, and labor rights, with a sense of grounded realism absent from Rubio's high-level abstractions. The bilateral Memorandum of Understanding on Security Cooperation is promising, but both sides stopped articulating a concrete implementation plan or mutual accountability. Likewise, while Rubio acknowledged regional concerns about U.S. tariffs on Chinese shipbuilding, he deflected responsibility to other branches of government, weakening the authority of his assurances. The discussion on the issue of migration was framed almost entirely through a law enforcement lens, missing any exploration of humanitarian protections or the root causes of displacement. In the end, Rubio's appearance was marked by theatrical urgency and ideological zeal, often overshadowing the policy details that such a visit should have highlighted. His tone, at times dismissive, combative, and moralizing, raised concerns about whether the current State Department can balance firmness with diplomacy. On the other hand, Ali navigated the moment with political skill, reinforcing Guyana's sovereignty while positioning the country as a reliable strategic partner. The contrast between the two leaders, one fiery, one focused, offered a revealing glimpse into the current state of U.S. diplomacy in the Caribbean and the rising diplomatic acumen of smaller nations charting their own course in a turbulent geopolitical climate. The federal investigation into California's Department of Education marks a significant escalation in the ongoing cultural and political clash between the Trump administration and Democratic-led states. At the center of the controversy is a California law passed in 2023 that prohibits schools from disclosing a student's gender identity to parents without the student's consent. Intended to protect LGBTQ+ youth from potential harm, such as abuse or rejection at home, the law reflects California's commitment to student privacy and autonomy. However, the U.S. Department of Education under Secretary Linda McMahon has launched a probe suggesting the state may be violating federal law, specifically the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act (FERPA), by allegedly helping students and, quote, socially transition and, quote, while keeping parents in the dark. The legal grounding of this investigation is murky. FERPA primarily governs the release of education records to third parties, not parental access to a child's mental health disclosures or personal identity, especially in cases where disclosure could cause harm. Rather than clarifying the legal conflict, McMahon's statement relies on incendiary rhetoric, describing California's policies as, and quote, immoral and quote, and driven by a, and quote, radical transgender ideology, and quote. This language reveals more about the administration's political agenda than any concrete legal infraction, framing the issue as part of a broader ideological battle against what it perceives as progressive overreach in public education. Moreover, threatening California's nearly $8 billion in federal education funding weaponizes the financial lifeline of public schools to score political points. Such a move undermines the very students the administration claims to protect, particularly those in marginalized communities who rely on robust public education funding. by ignoring the nuanced and often sensitive nature of gender identity in adolescence and by framing the matter in terms of parental control rather than student welfare, the administration discounts the real dangers some LGBTQ+ youth face at home. Ultimately, the investigation appears to be less about upholding federal law and more about reinforcing a conservative narrative ahead of election cycles, positioning the federal government as the defender of parental rights against what it casts as a radical liberal agenda. In doing so, it escalates the culture war at the expense of thoughtful, evidence-based policymaking and jeopardizes the safety and privacy of vulnerable students across California. Source: Politico. The Trump administration's decision to restructure the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, by slashing 20,000 jobs and consolidating 28 divisions into 15 represents an aggressive and ideologically driven attempt to shrink the federal bureaucracy. While cost-saving and efficiency are valid goals, the scale and speed of these changes raise serious concerns about the potential for long-term harm to public health infrastructure, oversight, and program delivery. The administration frames the move as a modernization effort to realign HHS with its core mission, particularly in tackling chronic diseases. However, the new focus, anchored in the creation of the Administration for a Healthy America (AHA), is not clearly defined in operational terms, and the consolidation of services across agencies with vastly different functions, from mental health to HIV/AIDS to maternal care, risks creating bottlenecks, confusion, and mission drift. Rather than enhancing coordination, this could deepen fragmentation, particularly if leadership and resources are spread thin. Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s messaging has been contradictory and inflammatory. His social media remarks cast the department as a corrupt, bloated institution with redundant and allegedly profiteering subdivisions, but he provides no substantiated evidence to support these claims. The claim that over half of employees don't show up to work is particularly irresponsible, as it disregards the prevalence of approved telework arrangements and undermines morale within a public health workforce already under strain. Moreover, Kennedy's insinuation that some HHS divisions are accountable only to the industries they regulate implies a degree of systemic corruption that demands further investigation or immediate clarification, not just rhetorical flourish. The job cuts are not insignificant: 3,500 at the FDA, 2,400 at the CDC, and over 1,000 more at NIH, agencies that provide foundational services in everything from disease surveillance to drug safety. While HHS assures that frontline roles, such as food and drug reviewers, are safe, the loss of institutional knowledge, internal oversight, and program management capacity could severely impair these agencies' ability to respond to crises or enforce regulations effectively. The fact that Medicare and Medicaid operations will remain untouched is cold comfort if the administrative scaffolding that supports fraud prevention, quality assurance, and policy development is gutted. Critics like Senator Angela Brooks rightly warn that these cuts could cost lives, especially given Kennedy's controversial views on vaccines and public health science. Her concern is backed by health policy expert Larry Levitt, who notes that much of HHS's work is invisible but essential, overseeing compliance, rooting out fraud, and ensuring care is delivered properly. Gutting this apparatus may offer short-term budgetary optics but could lead to increased waste, inefficiencies, and diminished public trust in the long run. Ultimately, this move seems less about reform and more about fulfilling a political agenda to shrink government regardless of real-world consequences. The influence of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, signals a technocratic corporate-style governance model that treats public service as a failing business that needs to be restructured rather than as a vital safety net requiring stewardship. If public health outcomes worsen in the wake of this decision, as many anticipate, the administration may find that its war on bureaucracy has come at the cost of American lives. Source: Emper. The United States has suspended its financial contributions to the World Trade Organization, WTO. This move aligns with Donald Trump's continued push for protectionist trade policies and broader efforts to reduce government spending. It also reflects the administration's long-standing retreat from international institutions that Trump and his allies view as incompatible with their America First economic agenda. These institutions include the WTO, the World Health Organization, the United Nations, and various foreign aid initiatives. The WTO had already been significantly weakened in 2019 when the Trump administration blocked the appointment of new judges to its top appeals court, leaving its dispute resolution mechanism only partially functional. Washington has accused the appellate body of exceeding its mandate in past rulings. In 2024, the WTO's operating budget was approximately $232 million, with the United States expected to contribute around 11%, based on its share of global trade. Failure to pay dues could subject the U.S. to escalating administrative penalties if the non-payment extends beyond a year. This latest development follows Trump's recent announcement of a 25% tariff on all cars not made in the U.S., set to take effect on April 2. Describing the date as Liberation Day, Trump claimed the move would boost domestic manufacturing. The White House estimates the tariffs could generate $100 billion in annual revenue. However, economists and industry analysts warn that the tariffs could severely disrupt global supply chains and raise prices for consumers. The policy shift has drawn swift condemnation from key U.S. trading partners. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney called the tariffs a very direct attack, vowing to defend Canadian workers and businesses. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen echoed the concerns, stating, "Tariffs are taxes, bad for businesses, worse for consumers equally in the US and the European Union." She added that the EU would evaluate the new tariffs' impact and other US trade measures expected in the coming days. Despite international backlash, Trump has doubled on his stance, calling cross-border supply chains ridiculous and declaring the shift toward domestic production permanent. Source: Newsweek. A federal judge has ordered Trump administration agencies to preserve signal messages exchanged between March 11 and March 15, following revelations that cabinet officials used the encrypted messaging app to discuss U.S. military strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen. Judge James Boasberg issued the temporary restraining order in response to a lawsuit filed by watchdog group American Oversight, which accused officials of violating federal records laws. The suit came after The Atlantic reported that top members of President Donald Trump's cabinet shared detailed operational plans in a Signal group thread just hours before the March 15 strikes. According to sources, some of the information shared by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth may have been classified, though the administration has denied that claim. As part of the order, Boasberg directed the administration to file a status report by Monday, including sworn declarations outlining the steps being taken to preserve the relevant communications. The Treasury Department has already recovered a partial version of the chat, with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed as a participant. The Justice Department says it is working to locate and retain additional signal messages from that period. American Oversight called the ruling an important step toward accountability, emphasizing that the public has a right to know how war and national security decisions are made, even if the discussions occurred via disappearing messages. During the 20-minute hearing, Boasberg aimed to find common ground between both parties to ensure compliance with the order. He also addressed public concerns about his role in other high-profile Trump-related cases, clarifying that the Signal case was randomly assigned. With a wry reference to a separate dispute over a deportation case, Boasberg reassured the Justice Department that this order would be issued in writing, quipping, "Don't worry, it will be in writing." Source: CNN. Donald Trump's remarks at the 2025 White House Iftar dinner offered a curious mix of superficial cultural recognition, overt political self-promotion, and casual irreverence that undermined the solemnity of the occasion. While he opened by acknowledging Ramadan and offering a traditional greeting, Ramadan Mubarak, meandering anecdotes quickly diluted the gesture, boasting about Muslim voter support and political name-dropping. Rather than focusing on the spiritual significance of the evening, Trump shifted attention to campaign-related praise, offhand comments about ambassadorships, and exaggerated economic claims, such as egg prices dropping by 50%, that felt tone-deaf in this context. Much of the speech revolved around thanking allies and appointees, with several moments in which he publicly announced ambassador nominations as a sort of public reward system for loyalty. This blurred the line between ceremonial diplomacy and political patronage and contributed to an atmosphere more reminiscent of a campaign victory party than a respectful interfaith gathering. His mention of school choice and keeping men out of women's sports was particularly jarring, injecting divisive political rhetoric into what should have been a unifying and spiritual moment. These comments felt like an appeal to his base rather than an earnest effort to engage with the Muslim community in a meaningful or respectful way. Structurally, the speech was rambling and disjointed, lacking clear transitions or a consistent tone. Trump moved from praising mayors to mocking the media, from discussing Middle East diplomacy to joking about the dinner menu, all without a coherent through line. His fleeting references to the values of Ramadan, reflection, restraint, prayer, were overshadowed by repeated self-congratulations and grievances with the press. Ultimately, the speech missed the mark as a unifying moment. What should have been a dignified celebration of faith and mutual respect became yet another platform for political point scoring. Though there were moments of warmth and acknowledgement, they were too often sidelined by Trump's need to dominate the narrative and frame himself as a singular benefactor to the Muslim community. Ultimately, the address came off as transactional rather than transformative, less a gesture of interfaith respect and more a campaign speech in religious clothing.